not possibly support a ruling which is such absurd as the ruling you have made. It is a ruling contrary to all the principles of international conferences held in the last 100 years. I can speak with some knowledge in theory and practice of international conferences, and I can assure you that throughout the many congresses of the 19th century and over 100 conferences held in the 20th century, there was no such a ruling given, no amendment refused to sovereign members of an international gathering. After all, are we an international conference or not? Are we entitled to say whatever our instructions, our views are or not? And if no vote is taken, if no amendments are allowed, the discussion is of no avail. It is inconclusive. Everything is suspended in the air. We have been presented with an almost fait accompli, with a draft treaty which some had the courage to challenge. And we want to be listened to. We want to have the right to present whatever amendments we wish, and we want those amendments to be voted upon. If you decide that the amendments of the Soviet Union are not to be voted upon, then this is not a conference. It is what Mr. Dulles said on July the 12th, a ceremony. There was an interesting point, a conflict of views between the invitation sent to the various governments and the statement made by Mr. Dulles at a press conference. He said, international conferences are no good these days. We proceed by negotiation. We proceed by diplomatic correspondence. And at the end, we shall have a ceremony of signature. The label is then false. This is not an international conference. Not the invitation of the State Department was correct, but Mr. Dulles' statement made much earlier was correct. We were invited under false pretenses. I claim, Mr. President, that I can search in any dictionary of any language and in the dictionary of your language to state what a conference means. Where your standard dictionary says a conference is a formal appointed meeting for council, deliberation, consultation, and discussion on a specific subject. Was there, at this conference, was there really council? Was there deliberation? Was there consultation or discussion? There was a series of unilateral statements. We were not allowed to discuss. We were not allowed to vote upon. And when amendments have been presented, they are refused to be put to the vote. Well, Mr. President, I think it is an unusual procedure. The first conference of this type I'm attending, and the first conference of this type I've heard of. And I can assure you that when I go home and teach my students at the university, I shall tell them of your ruling and of the value of such rulings in international. I think, Mr. President, the public is amused, but I think the occasion is too serious for amusements. We can have the amusements adjourned elsewhere. I wanted to conclude, Mr. President, that a famous Englishman once said that it is not enough to preach freedom of discussion. You have to practice it. If you don't practice it and preach it, it's sheer hypocrisy.
The delegate of the United States wishes to speak for 5 minutes on the rule.
Mr. President, this time you may surmise that I arise to support the ruling of the chair. And I do so because I think that the United States, as the government which called this conference, should take the opportunity to explain what the nature of this conference is and why the ruling of the chairman is entirely in order. This conference is totally unlike the conferences which have been quoted, which were conferences to negotiate a treaty. This conference followed 11 months of negotiation. And the honorable delegate of Poland says there should be an opportunity to talk. He and the delegate of the Soviet Union and the other countries concerned have had 11 months to talk. They have not only had 11 months to talk, but they have talked for 11 months. And I have a file that deep of the notes, memoranda, and memoranda of conversations that have taken place between the United States government and myself and the Soviet government and members of the Soviet Union. The talking has taken place, and the talking is about, I hope, to come to an end. Now, we made all of that clear beyond possibility of doubt at the time of the invitation. And we sent out an invitation which said that this conference was to be a conference which, following 11 months of negotiation and the negotiation of a text of a treaty which we described as a final text, was called to sign that text. And the honorable delegate of Poland says that he came here under false pretenses. Well, I would like to recall that at the time when this invitation was given, first the government of the Soviet Union said they would propose to come here and make new proposals. And we sent them this note. We said, "You have apparently misunderstood the nature of this conference. And in order that there may be," and I'm quoting from our formal note in writing to the Soviet Union, "in order that there should be no possibility of subsequent misunderstanding, the United States recall that the invitation is to sign a final text of a Japanese peace treaty. The San Francisco conference," we went on to say, "is not a conference to reopen negotiations on the terms of peace. That has been done by 11 months of negotiation." And then when the Polish government said that it proposed to come here and discuss all sorts of matters, we said to it, "In order that there may be no possibility of future misunderstanding, we point out to you that this is not a conference to negotiate or to make new proposals, but to conclude by signature a text of..."
Discussion having been concluded upon the question of supporting or not supporting the ruling of the chair, I now ask for a raise of hands. All those in favor of supporting the ruling of the chair will indicate by raising a hand. All those opposed to the ruling of the chair will please raise a hand. Order, please. Quiet in the galleries. Galleries will please maintain order. The ruling of the chair is supported by a vote of 46 to 3. We will now revert to the order which we were following when the question of the chair's ruling was adopted. I see the delegate from Czechoslovakia raising her hand. Do you rise to a point of order, madam? Would you come here and state your point of order?
A very brief and simple question. A request to count the abstentions too, Mr. President. Thank you.
Oh, yes. On that last ruling, may I have the abstentions? There were 46 in support of the ruling, 3 against it. How many abstentions? There appears to be 1 abstention. Apparently 1 country is not counted. That makes 50 votes. One delegation apparently is not accounted for. 46 in favor, 3 against, and 1 abstention. We shall now revert to the order which we were following before the question was raised in regard to the chair's ruling, and the order of appearances under the 30-minute rule began with the delegate of the Soviet Union. Wasn't that right? Yeah. Mr. Gromyko had put down his name to speak. He's entitled to speak if he wishes to do so. The next delegation to record itself is the United Kingdom. United Kingdom passes. The next delegation to record itself is the Polish delegation. Later. The next delegation to record itself is that of the United States. Later. The chair being in somewhat of a quandary how to proceed, will begin at the beginning. Each delegation wishes to be later, but the order in which they were recorded was as follows: the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, Poland, and the United States. The Soviet Union speak?
Concerning the first amendment to the project of peace, has put forward a position regarding the basic questions of the peace treaty. At the present conference, the Soviet delegation also has explained the position of the Soviet Union regarding the questions of a peace treaty with Japan. For what are the basic questions? The basic questions put forward by the Soviet government in the notes sent to the United States of America and also at the present conference. I will not repeat what has been said before, in particular in the first basic declaration of the Soviet delegation. This is shown in the records, including the discussion which took place during the conference, discussion which has taken place, unfortunately, under the regime of pressure from the part of the delegation of the United States. A frank discussion of the substance of the problem put forward in the American-British draft peace treaty, and in particular of any question regarding this peace treaty. The Soviet government has shown that one of the most important questions is the question of preventing the rebirth of Japanese militarism, in preventing the use of Japan in a new attack, in a new aggression. For that reason, proposals made by the Soviet delegation in connection with the peace treaty with Japan may perhaps be illegal, or perhaps it simply is not in agreement, and is in agreement with the national interest of the countries in Asia or outside of Asia. If you find a man in the entire world who will fight for peace and security, who would not agree with the requirements, demands of the Soviet governments, the British-American project does not give any guarantees against the rebirth of Japanese militarism, against the use of Japan into as an armed force. There are no such guarantees in the American-British project. In addition, this project opens the way for the rebirth of Japanese militarism. It opens even wider the dams, permits even more. It makes it even easier to give to the Japanese militarism, to the reborn Japanese militarism, and to give Japan back to the policy which has before led it to catastrophe. The American-British peace project not only opens the way to the rebirth of Japanese militarism, it also is a great danger to peace also, because it considers the use of Japan as an American strategic base. Each government, the American government doesn't even try to dissimulate this position. And this attempt it is impossible to dissimulate this attempt. This attempt was clear, and for that reason the position contained in the American-British project regarding the fact that the occupational troops should be pulled out of Japan within 90 days, but that Japan has the right to conclude with the United States or with any other country an agreement, a bilateral agreement or a multilateral agreement for the return or the retention in her territory of foreign troops. This is something which shows the true position, and it shows that the United States of America do not intend to do anything else but to use Japan as a military base. There can be no denial. The same thing will happen to Japan that happened to the Philippines. Its freedom will be a Philippine type of freedom. And until today, those are American military bases. The project of the peace treaty with Japan is also a danger to peace, because it considers also the use of Japan within a coalition, as a member of a coalition, obeying the United States of America and helping them and helping the United States in aggression. It is impossible to camouflage those purposes, but we might objectively appreciate the situation in the Far East, and to do so it is enough to consider the situation which exists in Japan following the mastership there of American authorities. And there can be no doubt in the fact that the government of the United States of America wishes to create a war bloc based on Japan, to create a new offensive alliance, and to use as an image, in the image of the so-called Atlantic Pact. And there is nothing in common between such creations and the interest of the defense of peace. And for that reason, the Soviet delegation considers it indispensable in showing it. And the Soviet delegation is certain that many countries, many nations, and many have, primarily those of Asia who have suffered from Japanese aggression, understand this point of view. I understand that it may be difficult for some to speak about this, not only openly, at least openly, but we do not have any doubts whatsoever that the Soviet position and that the proposals made and amendments made at this conference by the Soviets to the draft treaty will find an echo among the nations particularly interested in a real defense of peace in the Far East. Whatever may have said the representative of New Zealand, who have shown that they also see in the American-British project certain provisions which in one or in another way would be limiting, they would wish to see in this project provisions to limit Japanese armed forces. But those regrets have no meaning, there's no use in regretting, because there are no proposals made, neither by Australia nor by New Zealand, to the effect of bringing in such provisions. We can only regret it. I will not speak with certain other governments present here. They did not dare to show weaknesses of the project. It is possible that this can be explained in part by the fact that most of the governments represented here are not neighbors of Japan. They are separated from Japan by tens of thousands of kilometers. But that is, in spite of that, you cannot fail to agree with the fact that the representatives of China, the representatives of India, of Burma, and of other Asian governments, would have the right to be here and to discuss, and the fact that they are not here proves that there are weaknesses, that there are dangers in the American-British draft, which prepares a new war in the Far East. This project does not contain any provisions regarding the limitation of Japanese armed forces. Not even for the next few years. And so the Japanese militarists will be able to prepare a new aggression, and they will have an army, a navy, and also air forces. The Soviet Union, for that reason, has made a proposal concerning the prevention of a rebirth of Japanese militarism, and also other proposals concerning the limitation of Japanese armed forces. The Soviet Union has made a proposal which cannot be found in the American-British project, in order to which American-British, and also a project to permit a development of a peaceful economy in Japan without any limits. Instead of that, we find a series of measures which tie Japan hand and foot to the American economy and to the foreign monopolies which are being defended here, and which are the worst, the most dangerous, the most lying among all institutions. And the Japanese people will not profit from that. And the Soviet government has put in its own proposals a limitation, also a possibility for developing without any limits Japanese commerce and merchant marine. Nothing of this kind can be found in the present draft, because The Soviet Union considers that the proposals made by the Soviet delegation at the present conference concerning the economic provisions of the Japanese treaty correspond exactly to the national interests of the Japanese people, since they would permit to direct the resources, human resources and material resources of Japan, not for war, not for an army, not for a navy, not for aviation, but for peace, for an increase of the welfare of the Japanese nation. And for that reason, the Japanese nation will not, until now, was not able to raise its standard of living because the Japanese militaries never took into account its needs, because everything was used and will be used again for the development of armed forces. And regarding those questions, we have not heard here any declarations, any honest declarations regarding this question. The government of Japan, understanding in its own way its power to be the part it should play here at the conference, has merely made a few formal declarations in favor of the British-American project. The Soviet government 2 years ago have asked the Far Eastern Commission to make proposals regarding this question. The Soviet government at the present moment says that Japan ought to have all the possibility for the development of its peace economy. I have said before, and I have told the chairman, that the Soviet government is making a proposal, moving its amendments and additions because to the present draft, because this draft is not a project for peace, but a project for the preparation of a new war. That's the reason for which we are certain that our proposals, our amendments, would be accepted in China, in India, in Burma, and perhaps even in Ceylon. And I say that to the representative of Ceylon who has spoken to us. I'm quite certain that in Indonesia also, and in the Philippines also, and in all those countries, those amendments would be liked, will liked, in all of the countries which have suffered in the hands of Japanese aggression. The Soviet government, sending its delegation to the San Francisco conference, has based itself on the necessity of having everyone hear that what is called a peace treaty with Japan is not a peace treaty at all. This is exclusively a plan for the preparation of a new war in the Far East. This is a plan which is due to the government of the United States of America and which is not based on any desire to defend peace in the Far East or with the defense of peace in general.
The Chair recognizes the delegate of the Soviet Union. I beg your pardon, I mean the delegate of the United Kingdom. The Right Honorable Kenneth Younger, Minister of State.
Mr. President, fellow delegates, I'm asking you to bear with me for only a very few moments for a second intervention, because I think it would be wrong if I, as one of the two co-sponsors of this draft peace treaty, were to allow to go by entirely without comment